Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is Coach's Corner. I'm here with David Buck. Dave Buck, and you and I have been interacting on LinkedIn for quite some time. And so I do welcome you to the call. And we're going to talk about something of immediate interest, but it's not anything new because this has been going around for some time, but mostly in the perspective of people trying to find a job. But apparently, the idea of this, and we're going to jump into that idea real soon, is larger than just the job search. Dave, hi.
Hey, well, thank you, Keith, for having me back. I know I've done on other programs. It's always an honor. Love the work that you do and the inspiration you provide others. So when you asked me to be on, it was a no-brainer for me.
I do appreciate that. You are awesome, and I
Thank you.
totally appreciate that. The idea that we're talking about today, so just kind of give our audience some heads up, is ghosting. And so the reason I kind of prepped it the way I did is because typically we don't see that in terms of other aspects of our professional life, except for, well, this is my experience, people trying to find a job. And so typically we deal with so much chaos trying to find a job, whether we're working, submitting our applications in different organizations or using a headhunter. And even as a veteran, myself, who has worked with people who are kind of in the job hunt expertise, they're headhunters, or there's a better way of calling them professionally, helping you trying to find and navigate your way to your next job. You make a contact and you don't hear from them for 3 or 4 months. And so we consider that ghosting, but you have another perspective on this. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. It is a common element. The term ghosting usually applies, again, for those of us who spend any time on LinkedIn. You'll see posts about, I submitted something, I was invited for an interview, and then I never heard anything back. I was ghosted. They just left me hanging.
Mm.
Well, it is also creeping into our everyday lives. This term ghosting applies not just to searching for a job, but in other elements. And what inspired me to write an article on it was the fact that I had a family member who said, "Hey, you need to do this." She said, "Because I cannot have any confidence that either people I work with or clients I work with will honor a meeting that either I set up or they set up." She says, "I'm tired of getting ghosted."
Mm.
And so to me, that is now more pronounced in our lives. I think all of us have emails that we don't get responded to. We might meet somebody for lunch and they just don't show up. And so there can be real legitimate elements for ghosting. There can be items related to it that someone just forgot. But there's also, I think, a big component of it where people just don't seem to honor other people's time. And that's where I tried to unpack that in the article.
And I think that's a good leadway into the next step of this conversation is being respectful and honoring somebody's time. And so I typically do my best. And so I not always, when I get an email, it may take me a day or two to kind of get back to it. So I'm not intentionally ghosting somebody, but I do know that I get a lot of emails, and I know all of us kind of get bombarded with emails. But at the same time, just prior to jumping on, the record button here, you talked about, stepping up to a Zoom call, and then the very last minute somebody canceled. That's only ever happened to me once, and I thought that was really weird. To be quite honest, I had never happened that ever. It was just a meet and greet. It was just like, hey, we
Mhm.
we met on LinkedIn. We agreed to have a conversation. Literally, the minute they not only did they not show up, they literally canceled the call. And so sometimes I take offense to that. I don't take offense to that anymore because, I'm beyond that. But kind of expand on what I'm really at a loss because
Right.
I didn't never grow up with being rude to people. And so talk to me about that. What's going on in our world? What's going on in our psyches?
So I would clarify one thing about ghosting. And so, for example, if I get an email that comes to me, so if you get a somebody who's reaching out to you and says they want to sell you their service and would you please respond? I don't feel the need to respond because you reached out to me. But if any of us commits to something, whether we're going to say I'm going to get you something or yeah, I'll be there at the meeting, then I think the frustration of ghosting is legitimate at that point because it's something you've committed to. So the example you note, what happened to me was part of what I do is I'm a retirement lifestyle coach. So I work with people getting ready to go into retirement to help them craft a lifestyle strategy. I had within a couple of days, two other retirement lifestyle coaches reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'd love to talk about what you do and maybe we could collaborate together." Fine. Sent them my meeting link. They booked the meeting.
Mhm.
I didn't ask for it. They did on the same day, 2 hours apart. And so, ironically, my
Well,
family member sent me the email about, "Hey, I'm getting ghosted." And I was like, "Okay, I'll look at doing that article later." But then those two meetings, the first one wasn't there. I was on Zoom waiting. They weren't there. Now, they did email me a little later and said, "Hey, sorry, I was too busy. I couldn't attend."
mhm.
And then I asked them to reschedule. They never did at that point, never apologized either. And then the second one, I am waiting for them to come onto the call with me. And 1 minute before it began, they canceled the meeting. No message, no nothing. And at that point, I'm like, I got to dive into this ghosting thing a little bit more.
Now, when it happened to me, the first time, and literally probably the first of very few times, so, like I can't say this has happened a lot, but I took it personally. I thought maybe that I had done something to upset this other individual, and so, but I have to kind of move beyond that to say, maybe something did come up, or maybe this conversation wasn't as important to them as it was to me. And so I do take meet and greets rather personally, because it's kind of been my go-to since 2021 and COVID and the quarantine, to have real conversations with people. So when people don't show up, I do tend to take it personally. But more and more as I kind of move on, I'm beginning to recognize that not everybody shares that same value. So not everybody shares the values, somebody else's space, somebody else's time, whatever that is. And I'm okay with that because we're all going through life in our own way, with our own values. And if that's going to happen, then I kind of move on. And I think that's one of the things that you were talking about was, what does the individual do if that actually happens to them? Yes.
Yeah, and you touched on the first thing you need to do is I had a little pity party after the second one. I was a little annoyed, like "Nyeh, nyeh, nyeh, nyeh," and then it's kind of like, okay, now that I'm not happy, what's my alternative? And that's where I use a technique with my clients called PEC, which is preparation, execution, and control. So the idea is you use that system even before the day begins so that you immediately have an alternative in place if you get ghosted, where you can say, "All right, that's annoying. That was rude. Wish they would have let me know."
Mm,
But you immediately have something else to divert your attention with that's going to bring focus and productivity and benefit to you.
okay. So what does that actually look like? Because most of us, well, I'll just use me an example. If I set a schedule, I actually kind of prepare my whole being for that conversation because I don't know what to expect from it, whether it's going to be, a possible, business partnership, or, a new long-term friend. There's so many options, so many possibilities that could come from one single conversation, which is what I preach. So I'm going in with all the energy that I can. So I'm not thinking about a plan B.
Sure, and that takes some practice and some understanding. I think all of us need to know that any meeting that we have on our calendar, any activity or engagement that we're going to have with somebody else is subject to change just because things happen in people's lives. And so one of the first thing after I got over my self-pity was the fact that I reached out to each of the two and said, "Hey, looks like you are unable to make the meeting. Hope everything's okay. And here's a link if you want to reschedule. And so I assume positive intent. And those that it was a legitimate mistake immediately usually come back very empathetic, very sorry to what had happened, and will reschedule. If I don't hear back, then I just kind of figured that was part of their that it just didn't seem to be important to them. But in the planning process or the preparation process is what you do is say, what is the next best alternative thing I can do that I didn't have planned on my calendar for that particular day? So you're intentional in that to say, all right, if this meeting doesn't happen, I've got something I can work on that maybe isn't a high priority, but it's something I can do some work on. I'm going to flood the zone with this now time vacuum that I have to be able to fill something productive with it. So it takes a little bit of planning ahead of time, but as long as you have the understanding that there's a chance this meeting's not going to happen because they're going to ghost me, then again, you have a secondary thing to immediately fill your time that's going to bring you value.
So what's next? After you've done the prep work and you have got a plan B on the side, what happens next? How do you kind of step into this environment?
So then the ghosting happens. All of a sudden, you've got this quote found hour that you weren't looking for before. So you take a look at your preparation. The next step for me, the PEC acronym, is you begin to execute. But what you have to understand is typically whatever you plan, you don't execute the same way. It just it changes happen. So you have to hold yourself accountable in the execution phase to say, I'm going to quickly get over the emotional frustration I might feel to begin to work on whatever I had planned or prepared for. Then the second element is I'm going to hold myself accountable to continue to work through that time frame I had allocated now on this particular time frame, and not allow yourself to get distracted by other things. You kind of say, well, maybe I'll answer these 5 or 6 emails that came in now, or get distracted by something that's a lower priority. So yeah, the execution element says I am working to hold myself accountable. And you may have to say, wow, I don't think I prepared enough for this. So you may end up saying, as part of execution, you may jump back to do a little bit more preparation before you start. Because again, this is a secondary
Mhm.
priority that doesn't necessarily have to get done that day.
So you've mentioned it twice, and I've already said the same thing. Sometimes it hurts. There's an emotional attachment to wanting to have a conversation with somebody, and so um, any tips on how to kind of get over yourself emotionally? Because sometimes it does feel bad. You know, we plan to have a conversation, we look forward to it. We're humans. Connection is what we do. Somebody doesn't hold themselves accountable and leaves you alone. How do we deal with that emotionally?
I would what I do is I step away from my environment. I step away from the screens. I'll go out, take the dog for a short walk if I'm really frustrated. I'll leave the environment that I'm in right now. And even if it's a matter of, and I am not a big proponent of shifting, but if you want to say, I'm just going to go on YouTube and watch some fun videos, or I'm going to go do something, check out social media just to see, what did my friends do on vacation? Something that just says, I'm going to have a short burst to be able to decompress from the frustration I'm feeling before I decide to get back in. But I really push people, don't live in that for too long, because then it just becomes, you start thinking of any type of scenarios. I have a book that I really like called Crucial Conversations. And one of the elements is that we get to build our own stories. So we have no idea what's happened to the other person that they've ghosted us. So we have this wonderful idea that we can build our own story where we're the hero, we're the one that's wronged. But that can be a totally misrepresentation of the situation. So that's where I just say, disengage from the situation, go do something else that will help reset yourself to then shift to your what you prepared to do in anticipation of being ghosted.
And I'll agree with that because any chance I actually do get to kind of quite literally disconnect from all the technology that sits around me, I take advantage of that because the older I get, and forgive me, I do feel like I'm getting older by the day. I need to kind of step away from that, especially for my eyes, but more for presence and peace of mind, just kind of being consumed. I no longer, there was a time in my younger days that I would have gone to YouTube and kind of just filled up myself with 10 minutes worth of stupid video content. Um, and sometimes that's exactly what it is. I can't do that anymore. I literally have to step away and just kind of, I love the word that you use, decompress, kind of remove that energy away and kind of come back and, refocus what I've got to do. But this isn't it. There's one more step. Yes, there's one more step to the acronym.
Probably the most important is control.
Okay.
So the idea that as I've prepared and I begin to execute, how am I going to control the outcome? How am I going to hold myself that at the end of this time that I have done, that I have done my best to control the outcome that I desired? And again, it might mean I have to go all the way back and do some more preparation before I re-execute. But the idea is that at the end, I can say, I controlled what I needed to do in that particular time frame. It might be very different than what you thought at the beginning of the hour, but that's okay as long as you felt I was in control to get that done. And the three, preparation, execution, control, always work together in a self-improvement cycle. So this is where I not only apply it to just ghosting, but everything else that you do in your life. It's a continuous cycle that you get to improve upon.
So you are the time management expert. So how does this fit into the bigger picture of managing your professional and your personal time?
I'm glad you mentioned personal too, because we all have a tendency to just want to focus on the professional side of life and then use the personal side of life to just kind of figure things out and let it go through. So I'm a big proponent of integrating the two together as one strategy. And so, again, on the preparation side of things, it is planning every day. I plan my calendar 2 weeks out, and I call it the wet cement rule. So usually the first week, the foundation's pretty set. You know, the the concrete's been able to cure for a while, but the second week's very wet cement. I got a foundation built, but I know things are going to change. So the idea is you proactively plan everything out. You prepare for what life's going to be like. And then when you execute, you know that I'm probably going to have to change and adapt things based just today. I had to readjust a couple of meetings that happened because I had to reprioritize things. I'm still going to accomplish what I need to do in that day, but just a little bit differently than what I had thought. And so you continue to do that, you adapt and adjust, but you're executing against this plan. And then finally, the control aspects goes back to your accountability. I'm going to control the outcomes as much as I can because I am not a fan of the term time management. I'm more time optimization because to me, management is reacting. It is situations come at me and I handle them. I might handle them well, but at what expense? And so if I'm more proactive, I get to negotiate more when other people come my way wanting to expend my time to solve their problem.
Well, then I want to ask for forgiveness because I used the word management earlier, and so please,
No,
please
you're good.
forgive
You're
me.
good. Don't no forgiveness necessary.
So with all that as it is, where can people find you other than LinkedIn? Because I want to get to LinkedIn last. Where are you and what's your website?
So my website is infinitylifestyledesign.com. It's all one word, infinitylifestyledesign.com. You just get to the front page. I try to make it easy for everybody. There's a link to join my newsletter. And then you go down and there's the 6 things I can help you with. And whatever you feel fits within your lifestyle of trying to improve your productivity, trying to improve flexibility, you'll find whatever link you can learn more about the services that I offer.
Now, don't end there because I also know that you have a book.
I do. So thank you. And that's one of the 6, but thank you for highlighting that. So back in April, I published my first book, The Time Optimized Life. And the idea behind that, and you've heard I've used optimization a lot today, is that I want you to flip the script from how people reactively manage their time to proactively optimizing it and looking ahead to anticipate what's coming their way. So again, they have more control over their time.
You also have a newsletter on LinkedIn, but how active are you on LinkedIn? And I think that's probably one of the, other than your website, the best way to get in contact with you because that's how, we got to know each other. So what does your LinkedIn space look like?
Yeah, thank you for that. So, LinkedIn's my social platform of choice. It's where I choose to spend most of my time. I find for me as a platform, I get the most out of it, not only for what I put out there for content, but there's just for your example, your newsletter that comes out. It's just something that I find I get more nourishment for myself from an education standpoint, from positively motivated by LinkedIn. So obviously you can find me at LinkedIn, David Buck. Just do a search there. And my newsletter comes out every Monday, and the focus is all about time optimization, time management, whether you're in career or you're thinking about post career or retirement life. So thanks for noting that, Keith. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. So Dave Buck, thank you for joining me in conversation. This has been another edition of Coach's Corner for those of you who've been watching and listening. I'll see you next time. Take care.